in the room, but I try. But the thing is, if I'm hired to do social media, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know how to do it. I've done social media campaigns for other people before, but um, it's not my
Okay, we're live
thing.
on YouTube, so nice and hot, so be careful what you.
Gotcha.
Okay. So no more money talk.
No more. Put it in the back pocket. Don't call out nobody's name. No. See, and I feel so terrible because my phone is obviously not working. When what you've said plays back to you in real time.
Yeah.
Total meme. Yeah. So yeah, lots to talk about for sure.
Let me put this back up.
Mm-hmm. No one happens to have a charger for Dang. Oh, wow. The shade is real over here. Woo.
All right. Mics are hot. Camera rolling. Dante, you ready? Let me know when you're ready.
I'm trying to get this. Okay, airplane. Boom.
That water was really relaxing, though. I ain't gonna lie.
The what?
Just looking at the bubbles.
Oh.
Dante, be careful, don't bang on them because I got the low real high, so the bass will come out.
Okay.
On your audio. All right. Live on YouTube, mics are hot, camera rolling, audio rolling. Beyond the Brand, Dante Carter live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
What's going on, everybody? It's Dante Carter right here with the next episode of Beyond the Brand. And I am being joined here by my good friend, the amazing PR strategist, what is it? The PRpreneur? Is that what we bringing in?
Call me what you want.
Kaliah Henton-Jones. I mean, she is creating a space unlike any other. And that's, man, I just really get excited when we talk about building these spaces.
Yeah.
You founded Henton-Jones Media.
Yeah.
And, we got to talk about this, right? So we were working together over at CBS 46.
Yes.
She used to tell me what to do. That's what she used to do. She used to tell me what to do. I used to be like, man. She would say, Dante, you got my story? And I'm like, your story? I mean, I'm still trying to get the interview,
I'm getting PTSD.
Yeah. I'm like but, Kaliah, I mean, you were just, man, I just remember just how we had a great relationship working, but I just remember how good at your job you were. And I was just always, it was just, being somebody out in the field, we had to lean on you all as much as you all had to lean on us.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, when you always felt like that person you were leaning on had your back, it was like a solid wall that you were leaning up against. It just made everything so much easier. And then I hear that you're stepping out to create your media company, and I'm just like, man, I say media company, I know it's PR, but, it's all media.
It is. It's all media.
And, I want to be able to dig in a little deeper. Like, where did this come from? Was it something you were dreaming of before? Like, where did this, I want to start my own company, and I want to get out not just the black narrative, but going out and getting into the to the diaspora, talking about the Caribbean stories and getting deep in there. Where did all of that come from?
Well, first of all, Dante, I have to tell you, thank you for having me here. The check is in the mail for inviting me.
It is? How many zeros you got on there?
But for sure, I really appreciate having the opportunity to be on your platform and that you've created this platform.
Well, I just want us to be able to tell our stories. We're going to get back to that question, y'all. But I just want us to be able to tell our stories.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much. I keep telling folks there's so much diversity in the diaspora,
there
and
is.
I think the more that we can tell these stories and stories in a very unfiltered manner, I think, the
it's
better
powerful.
it'll be. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it makes us look multidimensional.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, that's one of the things that I really appreciate. But thank you for having this platform. So to answer your question, I obviously am Caribbean by birth. I was born in Jamaica, and I was raised in the cold streets of Brooklyn. But I came to New York as a kid.
Yeah.
And so I have this I believe it's a universal experience for a lot of people who have immigrated to this country, wherein if you come here young, you are Caribbean or you are what your culture is, but then you have this very American experience. So I grew up in a family and in a broader community that were entrepreneurs. So that was always very sexy to me. You know what I'm saying? The ability to go out and forge your own path, to make a way to support your community, to support your family, to elevate whatever it is that your vision is. Those things were really attractive to me. And so both my parents were entrepreneurs, and they were entrepreneurs at different seasons in their lives. But I pretty much said, you know, in the back of my mind, I was like, you know, one day I'm going to do that thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, I went to school in Florida for my undergraduate degree, and then I came back to New York. I moved back to New York. And while I was there, I was working for a small private women's foundation. And while I was there, I was like, Lord, what am I doing here? I don't know anything about philanthropy. Like, this is crazy. But I needed that space because I think it gave me such an even broader global perspective. Yeah. Because the foundation's work was to impact women and girls initiatives through a faith-based perspective. Wow. And so I was being touched by people who were, you know, came from Pakistan, came from the Caribbean, you know, Europe, Africa, like all these incredible women, and they were motivated to transform their communities through their faith. And so that was what the work funded. So I think that spoke to me deeply. But again, I was like, what am I doing here? I studied journalism in school. This is like a total departure. Yeah. And then I met this woman while I was there, and she was kind of like, life coaching was kind of new then. Yeah. But she kind of used me as her guinea pig. And so I kind of
spoke some life into you.
She spoke some life. I'm so serious. Yeah. Like, she really did. And when, after that experience, I wrote down, this was in probably 2002, right? Like a little whippersnapper, you know? Wrote down like all these like life goals that I wanted to achieve. One was to create a foundation. One was to start this company named Henton-Jones Media. And I didn't know what to do with that, you know? But I knew that I wanted to get back into journalism, so I ended up taking a job in Florida at a small station down there. Not small station, but a station down there. And kind of tuck that thing away. You get married, you got kids, you know, life is starting to happen to you.
Mama!
And, you know, you got to put them dreams on the back burner. Yeah. But long story short, I ended up taking the job to GCL in 2012. And when I took the job at GCL, I knew I could do the job, but I knew that there was probably something else. So within a year, I revisited that thing that I did in 2002, and I just woke up one day and was like, you got to get the domain name for Henton-Jones Media.
So you go get the domain name.
So I got the domain name and sat on it.
But you know what? Sometimes you have to, right? It's a starting point. Yeah. And so, but I'm always just curious, right? So you go from paradise. That's what Jamaica is to me. It's paradise. You go from paradise to these cold, dark streets of Brooklyn.
Big up to all of my Brooklyn masters right now.
BK in the house. What? So you go to Brooklyn. Yeah. Where'd you go to school in Florida?
College. I went to Bethune-Cookman. HBCU, yes.
I went to FAM, so, you know, I'm like, you know, I got a lot of respect for Mary. You know, me and Mary right here. You know, I was just reading about her last week. Yeah. I did not know that she started that school with 5 students and $1.50.
And some faith. Don't forget that faith.
That
component.
Faith. Yeah. But I'm just like $1.50. Like, and this is the stuff that baffles me, especially when it comes to us in this entrepreneur space. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, before integration, we had some hustlers.
And we've been there before. With less.
Yes.
We didn't have the internet.
She had $1.50, 5 girls, And a
some
whole
faith.
lot of faith.
And some faith.
What?
Yes. And look, I mean, if you go back and look at Bethune-Cookman, you know, when I was there, it was Bethune-Cookman College.
Yeah.
But now it's Bethune-Cookman University because
Yeah.
they offer postgraduate studies.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just kind of exploded, and I'm one of Mary's girls, you know?
Mary's girls.
Proud to say it.
Man. You know, I'm one of them Rattler boys, you know. I was like, I don't think we got a Mary at the top, you know. But I mean, that's amazing. And I mean, and so, you know, going back to your story,
Yeah,
I think all it takes is a little bit of faith.
absolutely.
You know, I'm gonna go a little biblical here, so y'all just I'm sorry, you know, y'all don't roll that way, but that's just how my mind works. But I even think about when God brought the Israelites out of Egypt.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the river they were crossing over, but he told them all to pick up a stone so that y'all remember where you came from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, man, it's that little bit of faith,
Faith.
just that stepping out and doing
Yes,
something.
Yes.
And just what that spirals into. And so, speaking of spiraling, so you get Henton-Jones Media,
Yes.
and you sit on it.
Sat on it like a goose egg. Sat on it, yeah. Because, you know, when you're used to, and just let's be frank, when you're used to that every 2 weeks, that money being in the box, right? And, you know, you're used to a particular lifestyle, you know that some decisions are going to change that dynamic
Yeah.
immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't ready to just take that step out there. So basically what I did was, while I was at GCL, I just kind of made a decision that I was going to go back to school. And I said, you know, I've always been fascinated. First of all, I was fascinated by the newsroom. That's why I wanted to be in a newsroom.
What fascinated you about the newsroom?
Ironically, when I was in high school, I did an internship at the local paper where I lived.
Mm-hmm.
And someone said to me, when you are a journalist,
Mhm.
you're a gatekeeper.
Mm.
And that thing just boom, boom, boom. I was like, I want to be a gatekeeper.
You want to be a gatekeeper.
I wanted to be a gatekeeper.
Did you feel like a gatekeeper once you got into
Oh,
it?
shit.
But you know, I think
I
that
felt like an usher.
yeah, but you know, and I think that all comes down to that ownership piece.
Yes.
You know,
absolutely.
like where's the ownership? You know, I was having this discussion with a guy last week, and I was sitting there and I was telling him, I said, look, man, I said, there's such a wide open avenue for minorities. And he was like, you really think it's that? I was like, it's wide open. I was like, we always do this talk about cultural appropriation,
Mhm.
but it's like the only way you stop cultural appropriation is what? To have ownership.
Yep.
You know, I was sitting here listening to this economist, and he was saying that the only group in America that does not keep a majority of their revenue is the black community. 98% of our revenue leaves our community.
Yep.
98.
Yep. It doesn't touch more than one set of hands.
98%.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Comes to us, then we give it to somebody else immediately. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't cycle through our community at all. Yeah. So true. Yeah.
And then you look at the number of business owners on our side compared to everybody else.
Yeah. Hmm.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. And on top of that, it's even more astounding when you look at media. You know, I'm not a lawyer, but, you know, like the whole Byron Allen conversation about media being able to be represented in being given funding or getting a slice of the pie when it comes to advertising. That conversation is really real because a lot of our
Come a little
culture,
closer for me.
a lot of
Thank
our
you.
culture is represented in the media, but the fact that media entities aren't necessarily getting they're not getting the financial end of that piece is real challenging.
Yeah. It's you know, and I would argue, you know, it's challenging, but it's also disheartening.
Yeah.
You know, because I was looking at the numbers and it's so crazy. So you talking about 30%, 36% of the black community is under poverty. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
Then there's another 30% that's sitting like right at the poverty line.
Yeah.
If they lose their house tomorrow,
That's
it's done.
it.
So you're talking about 66%
Mm-hmm.
of this group is I wouldn't even say making it. And that's why I keep saying, like, that middle class. So if you got 66% that are right
At the cusp, yeah.
at the cusp, poverty line or under,
Yeah.
where's everybody else at? And that's when you start to realize just how. So, you know, when I hear some of these guys saying they had that report, what was it like? I think it was back in 2030. If they don't, you know, if things don't change by 2030, you know, black economics are pretty much going to be like non-existent in terms of playing. I mean, that's the hard part. And that's why I you know, we've got such a great opportunity to bring people onto this platform who are doing the work, and everything that you're doing, it doesn't, like, this isn't just a black woman's inspiration. You know, you're inspiring a community. And so that's why I'm so appreciative for you to be here, just being able to share your story, because as a group, we're extremely talented. But what are we going to start doing with that talent?
Yeah.
And that's why I was excited when you said, well, I sat on it, but at least you were thinking about it.
Yeah.
You know? And so you're sitting at work, you're thinking about it. And you didn't just go for it, right? What do you think was that piece in there that kind of, because I want to, but you know, I want to fill in the gaps, because there are a lot of people that are feeling what you felt.
Yeah.
What did that fear look like? What was it? Describe it for us.
The fear of, you have 2 children at home. You have a home. You have bills, real bills.
Yeah.
And then you also, the wrestle of, am I good enough? Am I good enough to be able to handle something like this on my own? Like, it's easy to go to somebody else's job and work for them 40 hours a week, no matter how stressed out you are, than it is for you to take on your vision and really, like, walk that thing out. And so sometimes you really don't want to do that work, because it's not just the work of trying to get to make the money. It's the work of you and working out the issues in you, right?
Yeah.
To get to make that money.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I sat on that thing, but then I said to myself, you know what, Kaliah, you can do this. Like, but I felt like I needed to have the academic backing, right? To make me just feel like, okay, I can really, really do this. So, you know, I'd be in the newsroom all the time, and we would have like Kevin Hart come in, we'd have Frankie Beverly and May, you know, like all these people came in for interviews, and everybody else was like, oh my God, these people are in the newsroom. But I always looked at the person who was kind of shepherding the people into the room and talking to the producer.
Yeah.
And I was like, how does that person do what they do?
Yeah.
Like, how do you make the connections? How do you tell the story? How do you pitch? Like, I know what I do with it when I get it, but how do you even, because you're essentially making a human out of clay.
Yeah.
When you do that, right? You're making magic. And so I was really kind of drawn by that. And, you know, I went back to school and I finished in 2016. And then I said, you know what? Now's the time. Now's the time. I can't.
So when you went back to school, what did you do? Did you get your master's in PR, or what was it?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. I got my master's in journalism with a concentration in public relations.
Okay.
So, you know, I studied, and my classmates were like people who were like in public relations 20-something years, you know, landed accounts with Coca-Cola and Pepsi and, you know, big name brands. And I, you know, was a little bit intimidated, but I had to realize that what I brought to the table, which is my experience being in the newsroom and knowing what I want as a journalist, has value.
You know what sells.
Yes,
you know what's going to be attractive to
the viewer.
To the viewer. You know, because at the end of the day, if you can't keep that message in front of a viewer, what are you doing? And I think those are, you know, to your credit, you know, those are the tools that you just can't learn in a book. You know, like there are so many people that teach that have never stepped a foot in. They can tell you everything from a book standpoint. You know, they're extremely intelligent. They can break down the ethics and the rules of journalism. Yeah. But in terms of keeping that message in front of somebody, how do you tell a story that makes somebody who doesn't want to listen have to turn their ear to it? And like, those, and I think that's what you bring a lot to the table, and that's what's again, that's what's so inspiring about what you do, because we're in a place dealing with stories that oftentimes the majority does not want to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that for you that you were, did you say, you know what, I want to come in here and I want to share the stories of my people, what they're doing. I want to make sure that the majority knows. Like even when we were talking last time and you were breaking down the numbers in terms of how much they contribute to the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when did you get to that point? Because I know you were sitting here and you're a great storyteller. You know what stories sell. But when did you get to that point of saying, okay, I want to be able to go back and really put that work on display?
Yeah. I think God puts certain things in order in our lives, and we really don't understand the value of those experiences until we come out of them.
Mm-hmm.
So remember I was speaking earlier about my experience working at that private women's foundation.
Yeah.
I did not realize that during that season, he was preparing me for a mindset of giving back, right?
Say that again.
Well, let me pass around the collection plate.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, seriously, I didn't realize that that's what he was cultivating in me. And so when I got to the place where I could have some say in what had access and what didn't have access, I wasn't a true gatekeeper, but I did have some level of control. I said to myself, first of all, we live in Metro Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
There's a large constituency of Caribbean Americans that live here.
Yeah.
Why aren't their stories being told? They're part of the African diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
They're part of this culture that has contributed creatively, economically, socially, justice-wise. I mean, they have contributed. I'm from Jamaica, but the only thing about Jamaica is not Bob Marley and weed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's so many other incredible things that are happening. I was actually watching this podcast a couple weeks ago about some of the research that's being done in the water in Jamaica, and how that's contributing to the global environmental movement. And the fact that Andrew, our ambassador, Andrew Young. I'm sorry, I was having a brain moment.
No, you're fine.
But Andrew Young did a speech last year, an event that I did. And one of the things that he said is that the Caribbean is always the first impacted by our global missteps in environment. And if you think about it, when the hurricanes come through, they don't come directly across the Atlantic. They come through the islands first.
Yeah.
And they're the least contributors to environmental issues, but they receive the greatest impact from it. And so there's so much work that's being done in the islands to study that, but that's not highlighted.
Yeah.
I mean, they're people just like us, and they have stories to tell. So to bring back to your point, I discovered that I had a responsibility to help share the stories of Caribbeans.
Say it again.
I did. I kind of just had a moment where I was like, okay, this is part of your purpose work. Just to highlight the variety of us. We're not always just carnival and party, party, party. There's so many wonderful, rich things about our culture. I'm a part of this organization. I served on the board for 2 years, and some of the work that we did was humanitarian work. When hurricanes happened, we immediately responded. We did donation drives. We collected food. We collected non-perishable food, clothes, those types of things. We would do first-time homebuyers workshops because Caribbeans need homes too. We would do workshops on citizenship and immigration. We would do feed the homeless events. We would also do toy giveaways. I mean, these are things that are coming directly out of the groundwork of the Caribbean community.
Yeah. And I think, you were talking a lot about gatekeepers.
Yeah.
And I think you've positioned yourself to be one, but I don't think you did it the traditional way of how they lead us to believe gatekeepers come about, right?
Yeah.
You're like, you know what? I see that there's not a fence here. So I'm going to build a fence.
Yeah.
and I'm going to stand right in front, and I'm going to control what comes in and out. And I think it's just so much, there's so much power in that. And there's so much, it is empowering because it's economics, right? It's messaging, which if you understand messaging, you understand it for what? Last 400 years, there's been a message. The narrative
has been,
what has that narrative been?
Yeah.
You know, and so I really think it's not until we stand out and we come into these places that we can really be of impact. Yeah. And I sit back, like, even when the opioid stuff was happening, like, you know, I live in Sandy Springs, so I'm seeing, you know, white PR professionals joining with white doctors and all these other folks, right, to craft a PR message in terms of why we have to get more drug treatment facilities, why we need to get more Narcan on the streets. And I'm like, dang, man, if we would have had this in the 90s.
What? Or in the 80s in Brooklyn? I mean, I was just about to say, the crack cocaine epidemic was crazy.
Yeah.
You know, I came to the States at that time,
And so you sit back and you see, so when people say, oh, just, you know, because like people get upset with me. They're like, man, you talk about too many social issues. Make money, just make money. But it's like nobody's just making money. No. It's all social. Capitalism, it's what Dr. King said, capitalism forgets that we're social. Yeah. You know, we're social individuals. Yeah. And at the end of the day is if we're not taking care of socially, it's hard to get to that capitalism aspect, which is what you see a lot of times. And so that's why, I mean, to your credit, I mean, the experiences that you bring to the table, those life experiences are very vast and very different, but it brings a whole new language. It's like when we start talking, it's like foreign almost, you know. They're like, what? Like folks like, black people really feel, yes we do. Across the diaspora, we got some issues.
Yeah,
like,
we do. We do. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, and so I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
And you know, I sit back and I remember when we ran into each other down in Henry County. Yeah. And I was looking at your daughter and I was like, man, like, what does that do to her to see you bossing and flexing the way you are? Like, do you ever sit back and think about that?
You know, because she's a little boss.
Yeah. But she gets it from somebody.
Well, okay. Well.
I mean, you just don't wake up and say, I want to be a boss. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there has to, like, my sister called me and she was like, all right, I know your daughter's birthday's coming up. What do I need to get her? Yeah. And I'm like, just pick her up. No, I just can't pick her up anything because you get funny about them narratives. And I'm like, well, what do you think I would want her to have? I wouldn't be calling you if I knew Dante. I mean, first I think it's the hair thing. Then I think it's the girl power. You got all these empowerment things that you're doing. I don't know what tip you're on. And so I'm like, just get her a sweatshirt. Just get her a sweatshirt, you know. But I mean, I just think those narratives are so important. And I mean, so for you to understand the Caribbean American experience, understand its historical context, and then flex on it the way that you're flexing. I know your kid's sitting there like, oh man, when I turn 18, I'm gonna flex too.
Well, you know what's so funny? You are so spot on about that. And let me be clear. Entrepreneurship is a genetically passed down trait.
Yeah. You got to see it, because if you don't see it, you don't know what we're doing out in these streets.
It's passed down.
Yeah.
Right? So my son is like, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to own my own law firm. I'm going to also do real estate. And my daughter is like, I'm going to own my own fashion line. And, you know, in their mindsets, it's ownership, ownership, ownership. And I think it's because my husband and I try to model ownership. And, you know, it's not easy work because culturally we're being told to, you know, go to school, get an education.
Boo.
It has value.
It does,
it has
but you
value.
know.
It has value.
Look, when I went to speak, when I was down at my alma mater and I was speaking, I let them jokers know. Look, some of y'all gonna be the worker bees.
Yes, and some of y'all
gonna be creating jobs for the worker bees, but we still need people creating jobs. We need both sides.
Yeah, we do, and absolutely, and that's the power in our ability.
Yeah,
you know, we can create, and we can also facilitate somebody else's creation. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yeah,
you're right. So, you know, with my kids, they look at us and they're like, okay, they're doing it, I can do it too. They don't foresee themselves working on somebody's job. And there's nothing wrong with working on somebody's job, because I did it for years. And
Yeah.
it also gave me the life experience, and it informed my thinking in order to be where I am now.
Yeah. And it's good that your kids are thinking. I guess, for me, I get so passionate about the ownership is because just looking at the numbers and seeing how far behind we are.
Yeah.
It's like whoever is bold, brave, and courageous enough, I really want y'all to step in that space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we need you.
We
know what I'm
do
saying?
desperately.
Yeah, desperately.
Because you were talking earlier about the opioid epidemic and the Narcan and all these things, and the fact that they're messengers that are shepherding that message into the broader public sphere.
I mean, even marijuana.
Like the switch.
Yeah.
It's like, it's all of a sudden it's like super cool,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, okay, if you don't have people in those places that's shepherding the message,
Yes.
that's shaping the narrative,
Yes.
then you get blown over, and like what happened in the 80s to the black community happens. And the
Bam.
narrative is deadbeat dads, everybody's drug addicted, communities are ravaged, buildings are burnt down, all of these narratives, and they stick in people's minds.
Stay there.
And so you need to have the shepherds that are really kind of funneling where
Yeah.
the message is going and crafting it as well.
And I mean, it's across the board. I mean, the fact that they were like, okay, we need a doctor. Let's go get Dr. Susie.
Yeah.
Okay, we need the police chief. What do we need to do to get him in?
Right.
Like they just down the board, just pulling everybody
pulling them
in.
out, yeah.
Now you got a 20-seat
Board or council or
opioid
something.
drug task
Yes.
force reduction unit.
And
I'm like,
czar and all this stuff is so true.
I'm like,
yeah.
man, it's so like, but those are the things we need because it's so crazy. So, my wife and I, we went to one of my friends' wedding in New Orleans, and we went down to the Whitney plantation. So, for one, I didn't know the descendants of those slaves lived on that plantation until 1975. Yes. Still on their sharecropping. Like, man, yes. They were on that plantation until the plantation, literally shut down.
And they were sharecropping?
Yes. They were still living there. Like, the houses and everything are still on that plantation.
Wow.
Yeah. It is so, and it's the only plantation that's told through the perspective of the slaves. But it was so crazy because I didn't realize it. But another one of the stories that I was learning about, which kind of hit me, and I was just wondering okay, when did it change? But so apparently amongst the slaves, there was this thing that if a male slave and a female black slave got together and had sex, that it was that male slave's responsibility to ensure that woman was taken care of. And I was just like, man, so in slavery, in those harsh conditions,
Yes.
there was this mindset. And so I was like, well, how did they even keep that going?
Yeah.
And the whole point was, well, the older male slaves ensured it. They were the ones that sat them down, had that discussion. Like once they found out, and he was like, it wasn't easy to hide that stuff. Like when it happened, and folks, they knew. And so I sat back and I was like, so when did that change?
In the 70s.
You see what I'm, but what I'm saying is it's that messaging. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And so to your point, it is having those gatekeepers, and it is being able to tell those stories. And I just sit back and I'm looking at this stuff, and I don't understand like how these gatekeepers aren't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't there more of us in these places? It's like, yeah, having Atlanta with all these black politicians and people in power is awesome, but if there's no economic vacuum connected to it,
Yes.
you know,
yeah.
like-
and all roads are not leading toward home.
Yeah.
You know, like it stops at a certain point. Yeah, that is very challenging for me as well.
Yeah.
And that's why, like you said, we need more people who are telling those stories. And I think a lot of the times the reason why there aren't enough of us that are coming out and speaking on behalf of the narrative, the broader narrative, is because they're comfortable. They're comfortable. And not only are they comfortable because they see things on their job,
yeah,
right? Wherever they're gatekeeping or called to lead or whatever, they see it,
Yeah.
but they kind of overlook it because they're like, okay, I'm comfortable, you know, I can figure out how to maneuver this or whatever. And the call for greater impact is not as strong
Yeah.
as it is for
Yeah.
maybe other people. And
What-
it's not a judgment. It's just
Yeah.
where they are.
Yeah, I'm kind of like what was that rapper's name from that show on Netflix? The one that won D. What was it? Gosh, I can't. But anyways, in one of his songs, he had a line that I love. He said, "Every kid needs a hero, and I'm trying to be Uncle Stan Lee." And
Oh, wow.
I was like,
You better create that thing.
And so, but it's
Yes.
true because I just remember,
Yes.
like, for me growing up and in
Uh-huh.
poverty, how hard it was. And you were like, where are our heroes? Those are the
Mhm.
things that go through your head is, where are our heroes?
Yeah.
And it's like, then you start to realize we have to become them.
Yeah.
And even if we don't see them,
Yeah.
that bar is there.
Yeah.
And it's, if you don't rise up to the bar and the folks next to you aren't rising up to the bar, then what happens?
Hmm. I mean, if you think about it, Dante, and I hate to just kind of bring in the same cultural icon, but if Martin Luther King decided he was not going to be Martin Luther King and just be a regular old preacher
Mhm.
in a Baptist church, a black Baptist church, and he wasn't going to touch social justice, where would we be as a people?
Yeah.
If Malcolm X decided that he was just going to be Malcolm serving at a mosque, you
Come
understand
on.
what I'm saying? And he was just going to be for his family and
Yeah.
be for his mosque or whomever. Or if Harriet decided, you know what, I'm not going to go back and get them. They're on their own.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so crazy because the more and more I read about Harriet Tubman's story, and we're going on all types of tangents, y'all, but we're trying to impart some wisdom here. You know what I'm saying? So just flow with us. Give us a second. Give us a second. We're going to get to it. But, I mean, even her even the first time that she went back, it was to get her husband.
Yeah.
But by the time she got to him, he had already remarried.
Hmm.
And then she said it was at that moment that she realized God didn't have me come back for him. He had me come back for my family.
Mhm.
And that's where she started. And gosh, she took, I just sit back and think about all the trips back she took.
Yes.
And how brave she had
Yeah.
to be. And it's like, we got to get to that point of being courageous
Yeah.
enough, being brave enough to
Mhm.
say, you know what? I see the odds, but I also see what's on the other side of those odds.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we're not in these places,
Yeah.
and it's not just social justice, because
Mhm.
social justice doesn't work if you don't have the economic vacuum
Yeah.
connected.
Yep.
And so these two work together.
They
And that's
do.
why I say you can't, like, you can do the capitalism talk all you want to, but the reality is in every community, the issues are still what? Social.
Social, absolutely.
Every community.
Everything.
You know.
Everything is social, everything is
Yeah.
political. And then, as we were saying a little while ago about Dr. Martin Luther King, he was wise enough to even see that the issues facing Black America at the time weren't going to be enough to change the general public's perception about right versus wrong.
Yeah.
The issue that he used to frame the March on Washington in '63 was economic justice.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody was feeling the pinch. Everybody wanted to make money. Everybody was having issues with the labor force. And that was the issue that brought everybody to the mall.
But and the crazy part about that is that issue, and whether you agree with it or not, I mean, that whole issue, it hasn't changed.
Mm-mm.
And when does it change?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you think about it, right, what is capitalism about? Capitalism is about who controls the labor.
Yeah.
And capitalism started with what? Slavery.
Yeah.
And
Cheapest
cheap-
labor force ever.
you went free, then you realized you couldn't get it for the free.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, how cheap can we go?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's when you start to look at this stuff and you start to understand what's really taking place, it's like, man, well, okay, the only way to, and I don't want to say change things, but the only way to really protect the community in which you live, because that's what it comes about.
Mm-hmm.
You got to learn to play the game well enough to protect your family, and then once you've got your family protected, you got to protect your community.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, I mean, what happens?
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, you bring, I believe you bring everyone with you.
Yeah.
There's there's no sense in feeling like you've gotten there on your own. We didn't arrive here on our own.
Mm-mm.
We didn't get access to education. We didn't get access to opportunities on our own. Someone had to stand in the gap for us.
Yeah.
And so now it's our responsibility to not only change the circumstances that we're in, but we also need to make sure that we help usher in the next
Yeah.
generation so it's easier for them.
Yeah.
It was easier for us, then we can't just let it stop with us.
Yeah.
And we can't be so self-focused that we don't pay attention to the fact that there are others that are coming behind us.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think what people got to understand, especially when it comes to black people and entrepreneurship, is you got to understand not just the history of your profession and the
Yeah.
industry that you're in, but understanding the history of the people who look like you that were in that industry, and either how they rose to the top of that industry or how they created their own space within
Yeah.
the industry. And for PR, and this is why I give you so much credit, because PR for black people across the diaspora started with what?
Social justice.
Social justice, spotlighting it.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the PR guy behind Malcolm X, you look at the PR guy behind Martin Luther King Jr. They were all black people that had a focus on ensuring that they got the message out. And I gotta stop saying men, because there were a lot of women in
Oh,
there, and I gotta work
absolutely.
on that as
Oh,
well.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I do apologize.
Particularly King.
Huh?
Yeah. Particularly King.
Yeah, and I mean, even I can't remember, but even Maynard Jackson's
Yes.
ex-wife, I mean,
Mhm.
who's still a force here in Atlanta, but she was in PR.
Mhm.
She shaped the narrative around his first run for
Yeah.
mayor.
Mhm.
You know, him becoming the first black mayor of a major city.
Mhm.
And so it's you got to understand where your people started in that
Mhm.
space.
Mhm.
And I think if we got back to the basics, because people keep saying, oh, you can't talk about social stuff and make money, but it's like, you do realize that before integration, when all these folks were owning businesses, like
Yes.
this is how
This is how they got
this
there.
is how they got. I mean, even what were the black news outlets talking about?
Yeah.
All day, every day.
All day, every day. Yep.
Emmett Till.
Yep.
A lynching here,
Yeah.
lynching there, and they still got advertisement. Well, who were the advertisers?
Mhm.
Well, black businesses. What were they talking about? Social justice. And I'm
Right,
like,
right. Yeah. It was the collective watering hole.
yeah,
Right? So everyone felt like they had a stake in it because you invest a little bit, the returns were potentially going to be greater. It
Yeah.
was our original, stock market,
Yeah.
social justice.
yeah.
So yeah, it's
Well, I mean, it's so deeply embedded in America. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
That the only way to really, so it's, and Dr. King said it best.
Mhm.
He said, don't be ashamed of who you are, because
Right.
somebody told a lie one day.
Hmm.
The problem with that lie is they did what? They wrapped laws around that lie.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And those laws shaped the way our communities were policed.
right.
Those laws shaped the way our how we were sentenced.
Yeah.
And so when you understand,
And thinking.
yeah, it's really critical thinking. So if you're really going to get back to changing the way
Mhm.
things are,
Yeah.
it's like, wow, okay, I got to get back to the basics. Well, what are those basics?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah.
It is. It's a very deep and wide-ranging space of change. Like, it's not just change in one specific area. The change is everywhere.
Yeah.
Like the work, and the thing is, all of us, whatever your gifting is, whatever your background is, it is a part of that change that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And the thing is that as people of color, as entrepreneurs, we need to remember that we hold a significant value.
Yeah, we do.
We have something that is so valuable. It's that it factor, that
Mhm.
little bit of magic.
Yeah.
We don't know what that je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi. C'est quoi.
We have that thing.
Yeah.
And so if the broader culture is constantly trying to undermine that, you have to realize that that's worth protecting,
Yeah.
because it's valuable.
Yeah.
And because it can change so many things.
Yeah.
I think once we get to that space, I was listening to a message that my pastor preached, and he said, you have to remember that we are a creative force.
Mm-hmm.
We are creators. We're content creators. Just even look at the thing, Black Twitter.
Yeah. We just be spinning stuff, man.
It's crazy. Yeah. But, people who are not Black go to Black Twitter.
Yeah, because they want to know what we're talking about.
They want to know what we're talking about, because the spin we put on it is crazy.
Yeah, and then LeBron James will say something. Well, what did he mean by that? Girl, we need to go to Black Twitter. Figure out what's going on in there, man. They plan to revolt. No, we just trying to make some money.
Yes, but
Yeah.
it's incredible, our ability to transform spaces. But if we don't take a step back and look at the potential and the opportunity in that, then we'll miss the mark.
And that's the thing. And so when we talk about transforming spaces, it's like we're creating these spaces. Mm-hmm. Now, how do we take ownership of that creativity? And I think that's where we got it. It's like hip hop. That money should be funneled right back into the community where it started from. I mean, where did rap come from? But it cut school budgets. You can't, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. We ain't got a guitar. We ain't got drums. Well, what are we going? We're going to remix James Brown. You know what I'm saying? Yes. And so it's like, man, so it's like all of these things came from deprivation and all the things that were taken. Mm-hmm. And it's like at some point we've got to say, we created this out of nothing. Now, how do we put something back into it?
So my first thought for that is that culturally we came out of space of
I'm getting
faith.
the wrap-up sign.
Okay.
So. But keep going, finish it.
Culturally we came out of a space of faith,
yeah.
Right? And the faith is what informed us to be able to make it through our experiences here. Right? Mm-hmm. So I think first, like Mary McLeod, we're wrapping up the conversation. Mary McLeod Bethune, she started her school with $1.50 and some faith. That faith was so important. And once we decide that we understand that faith is a belief in something that is greater, that is better, that is stronger, right? Once we buy into that, then we say, I can. So I think it's faith. And then I think it's saying, I can.
Yeah.
And then you start just walking out the steps.
Yeah.
If it's starting the business, it's sitting down, write the vision, make it plain.
Yeah.
It's not just going to come to you. Write the vision, make it plain, and then you start taking the actual steps to make that thing a reality. I didn't think, 8 years ago when I was sitting on a job that I would have the company that I have now. I knew it was in the back of my head, but I didn't know until I started taking specific.
Faith the size of a mustard seed.
Faith the size of a mustard seed.
Yeah. So, Kaliah, let all the listeners know where they can find you.
So I can be found at HentonJonesMedia.com, first and foremost. And then secondly, you can find me on social at Kaliah Jones, and Kaliah is Kaliah.
Why don't you ever correct me? I always say Kaliah, and you don't ever correct me.
Hey, look, I say it like this. I've been called so many names in my life. Just don't call me late to dinner. We're good.
I'm just like, because I'm sitting back here listening. I'm like, I heard her say Kaliah, but I always say Kaliah, and she don't know.
But you know what?
Y'all
You're closer
Forgive
than
me.
most people. So, yeah, you can find me at Kaliah Jones on Instagram. You can also find me at Henton-Jones Media on Henton-Jones Media 1 on Twitter. You can also find me at 404-618-4777.
And don't call that number after hours.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we are so grateful to have you here on our
Thank you
show.
for
We
having
went
me.
the whole hour, y'all. Look, listen, subscribe, like, comment, share, all those things. And tune in here next week for our next episode of Beyond the Brand. I'm Dante Carter. Thank you so much for tuning in. And also, if you need the podcast, hit my man up. We got him right here in JVid Studio, TOV, Digital Media. We're doing it big. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Take it easy. Peace.
Yay.